Salakia, I was interrupted, so I had to start a part two here. My apologies.
Version of these distinctions. Fifth, Equiano describes washings and cleansing practices around food
Nosy
and
mo.
before eating. He writes that his people washed before meals in ways that had a ritual dimension, not merely a hygienic one. In the Mosaic Law and in later Jewish practice, ritual hand washing and washing before eating carries deep religious significance. And then Equiano does something that most writers would stop short of doing. He does not just describe the parallels, he draws the conclusion openly. He writes that he cannot help believing that his people were descended from, or in some way connected to, the Jews. He uses the word Jews. He's not being poetic.
Which is, of course, just at the end of the day, descended from Judeans. That's just one tribe. All right. Now we know that they were considered all the three tribes that were left, Judah, Benjamin, and Levi. And I always say to myself that, people just stop trying to distinguish the southern kingdom tribes and just call all of them collectively just Jews. All right. Probably one of the first times that they're saying, well, you all look alike, so.
He's making a historical claim based on cultural evidence that he personally witnessed. Now stop for a moment. A man who was actually there, a man who grew up inside that culture, a man who had no political motivation to make this particular argument because it was not a popular argument even among abolitionists in 1789. This man looks back at everything he observed as a child and says these practices look like the Old Testament. That is a first-hand testimony from a primary source, and in historical scholarship, first-hand primary source testimony from someone inside the culture is considered among the highest categories of evidence. So why did it get buried?
Why did it get buried? Certain people in
To
power
understand
needed
why
him.
Equiano's cultural claims were systematically ignored, you have to understand the intellectual and economic environment of 1789 Britain. The slave trade was the economic engine of the British Empire at this point. It was not a fringe industry. It involved some of the wealthiest and most powerful families in the country. Cities
Who knew who we were, really. That's why I referenced Psalms 83rd chapter earlier. All right, in the first video here, I had to start over because, like I said, I was interrupted. But, yeah, they were all Confederate. All right, and keeping us, or keeping our true identity from us. It was in their best interest for profit's sake. Aside from the fact that you have others claiming to be us. All right.
like Bristol and Liverpool had been built up on wealth generated directly through the buying and selling of human beings. The
There you go.
insurance industry,
Specific human
the
beings.
banking
Specific.
industry, the sugar and cotton economies of the Caribbean and the American colonies, all of it was connected to the slave trade by visible threads of money and commerce. Ending the slave trade was not just a moral question, it was a financial catastrophe for a specific class of very powerful people.
Atera, the IT painkiller. Remote monitoring and management. Remote access. Help in ticketing. Smart automation.
For the slave trade to continue operating with social legitimacy, it required a specific ideology. That ideology had to answer one basic question. How do you justify enslaving a human being? The answer that the slave trading system had constructed through decades of sermons, pamphlets, legal arguments, and eventually scientific-sounding texts was that Africans were a fundamentally different and lesser category of human, not quite equal, not quite fully.
Says the caveman, the woodwose, in his pride. They knew exactly what they were doing. They had to elevate their own bestial selves. All right. This is that hatred that goes back between Jacob and Esau. All right. And ultimately it goes all the way back, all right, to Cain and Abel.
Rational, not quite fully capable of civilization in the European sense, subhuman in the logic of the system, even when nobody used that word quite so.
In a European sense. This is how they rationalize it. Because people didn't live like they lived. So they must be inferior. And what do you see now as a result of how they live? See, what Edom does not understand is that, yes, he sold his birthright. But upon his trying to get it back, he overlooks the fact that, yes, what you did for a brief moment in time, by comparison, you actually are living proof of why you shouldn't have it. You've been in rule for how long? You've been a steward of the earth in that time, and under your stewardship, what have you done? So who's the real primitive here? Revelation 11 and 18 tells me that it's you. Let's get that real quick. This was not within our power to do this. All right, this is Revelation 11 and 18. And the nations were angry, and thy wrath is come in the time of the dead, that they should be judged, that thou shouldest give reward unto thy servants, the prophets, and to the saints, and them that fear thy name, which is not Edom, small and great, and shouldest destroy them which destroy the earth. We are not capable, all right, to the degree which you have gone, to do what you've done.
So plainly. Now imagine what happens to that ideology if Equiano's cultural argument is taken seriously. If the Igbo people, and by extension other West African peoples, preserved practices that can be traced directly to the ancient Hebrews, then you have a direct line connecting the enslaved people in the hold of the ship to people of the Old Testament, the same people that every Christian in Britain claimed as their spiritual ancestors, the same lineage that sat at the foundation of European religious identity. If the enslaved Africans were Hebrews, were descended from Hebrews, or connected to the same ancient covenantal tradition, then every theological and moral argument used to justify their enslavement collapsed at the roots. This is not a small problem for the slave trading class. This is an existential problem. Because the people sitting in those churches every Sunday, the people being told that slavery was acceptable in God's eyes, were also the people reading the Old Testament. And the Old Testament had very specific things to say about enslaving the people of Israel. It had very specific things to say about the treatment of those who carried the covenant.
Oh, let's get it. Oh, shucks. Oh, let's get it. Esau, you are fucked. All right, long, hard, and deep. This is Exodus 21 and 16. And he that stealeth a man and selleth him, or if he be found in his hand, he shall surely be put to death. All right, let's go on down to Zechariah, what does it say there? Oh, yeah, you got problems there, buddy. Zechariah 2 and 8. Mm-hmm. Somebody in trouble. For thus saith the Most High, Yahweh, the Lord of hosts, the Lord of armies. After the glory hath he sent me unto the nations which spoiled you. Let's get that in the, all right, spoil. What did you do to us? Strong's H7997. To drop or strip, by implication to plunder, let fall, make self a prey, spoil. Let's look that up in, oh, let's go to spoil. Oh, let's see what you did there. Oh, let's see. Oh. Let's see. Diminish or destroy the value or quality of. Yes, you did. Harm the character of. You still do that continuously in your news. All right. Let's see. Let's see if we can expound on that a little bit more. Miriam, let's go to dictionary.com. Let's try that. Let's see here what we got. To damage severely or harm something. All right, especially with reference to its excellence, value, usefulness, etc. What? That sounds like a scripture I remember reading a time or two. Let's go to Psalms. Oh, let's see. Was it 62? And 4? Let's see. Why, yes, indeed it was. Psalm 62 and 4. They only consult to cast him down from his excellency. They delight in lies. They bless with their mouth, but they curse inwardly. Selah. Well, well, what do we have here? Let's continue on.
If the connection equiscribing was real or even plausible, the entire moral architecture of colonial slavery had to be rebuilt from the ground up. So the easier solution was simpler. Dismiss it. Ignore it. Focus on the parts of Equiano's book that could be used for the abolitionist argument as it was already constructed: the brutality of the Middle Passage, the violence of the plantation system, the humanity of the individual, and quietly set aside the chapters where he talks about Igbo customs that sound like Leviticus. That is what happened. Equiano's narrative became famous. Equiano himself became a celebrated figure, and the specific cultural argument in the early chapters of his book was treated for nearly 200 years as an interesting curiosity, an overreach, a romanticized comparison from a man understandably eager to dignify his people. It was not taken seriously as historical evidence, not by mainstream historians,
Of
not by
course
real
not.
scholars, not by the institutions that shape how history was taught and
I
remembered.
wonder why.
And that dismissal was not an accident.
How they shaped. Let's go back to that little bit right there. Y'all don't want to believe when we tell you that, hey, not by institutions,
Scholars, not
but
by the
what?
institutions that shaped how history was taught and remembered.
That shaped
And
how
that
history was
dismissal
taught
was not
and
an
remembered.
accident.
That's very
It was
important.
a choice made by people
There you
who
go.
had every reason to make it.
Mm-hmm.
Never, and I mean never, do just if you're over 5 and have these 5 signs.
Now, if you have been following this channel for a while, you know that Equiano's testimony does not stand alone. In previous episodes, we have looked at other threads in this same wider story. We examined the 1611 King James Bible translators and what their own linguistic notes suggested about African connections to Hebrew. We looked at DNA evidence from Oxford researchers exploring ancient
Not
migration
African.
patterns. We explored Ibn Khaldun's 14th century writings, which described communities in North Africa preserving practices that echoed Israelite traditions. We have looked at the transatlantic slave trade through the lens of Deuteronomy chapter 28 and at ship manifests that raise questions historians have not fully answered. Each of those threads comes from a different direction.
Nor do they want to answer. All right, but that's why we're out here on the highways and byways, because these questions have come back up in a huge way. All right, I believe it was one of the either elder apostle Tahar or one of the other apostles that used the example of a buoy when it comes to the truth. You can only suppress it so much. All right, eventually it's going to bob up to the top. All right, and that's what's happening now. They're being exposed for the frauds, for the liars, the murderers, the thieves that they are. All right. We're in that 2 Thessalonians 2nd chapter. All right, where the man of sin is being revealed. There ain't a damn thing you can do about it.
Each one is a separate line of inquiry. What makes Equiano's account different from all of them is the nature of the source. Every other thread is external observation, a European linguist looking in from outside, a DNA study running samples through a database, a medieval Arab historian writing about peoples he observed from a scholarly distance. Equiano is none of those things. Equiano is an insider. He is a man who was born into the culture, who grew up inside it, who absorbed its practices the way you absorb the air of your childhood home. And he is literate, educated, and writing in English in 1789 in one of the most widely circulated books of his era. There is no translation problem. There is no intermediary interpretation. He is telling you directly what he saw. And the details he gives are precise enough to be checked. That is the remarkable thing. He does not say, my people had some general religious practices that felt similar to ancient Hebrew ones. He says circumcision on the 8th day. He says first fruit offerings. He says purification after touching the dead. These are specific, checkable, datable practices. They are described in specific chapters and verses in the Old Testament, and they match. Now, scholars today do debate the exact nature of the Igbo-Hebrew connection. Some argue for a direct ancestral link. Others argue for parallel cultural evolution. Others argue that some of the parallels may have been
How about the same level of scrutiny for those pieces of shit that are over there now? How about that? How about that?
introduced through trans-Saharan trade networks that brought cultural elements from the ancient Near East into West Africa over centuries. These debates are legitimate, they are worth having, but all of them have to begin with the same acknowledgement. Equiano described these practices, he lived them, and they match the Old Testament with a specificity that cannot be dismissed as coincidence or poetic license. The more important question is not whether we can prove the exact historical mechanism by which these parallels came to exist. The more important question is why it took 200 years for mainstream historical scholarship to take Equiano's testimony as a cultural and historical document, rather than treating it as a curiosity to be noted and moved past. And the answer to that question brings us back to the same place it always does, power, and who benefits from what gets remembered.
There you go.
What do you think? Is Equiano's testimony the strongest piece of evidence in this entire conversation? Or do you think the external sources, the DNA studies, the linguistic records, carry more weight? Drop your answer in the comments. There is no wrong answer here. This is exactly the kind of question historians argue about in journals and conferences. We want to hear how you reason through it.
The Sermon on the Mount is the longest
Look at this
continuous
shit.
discourse attributed to Christ's gospel. And it's widely
Perfect
regarded
timing.
as contain.
Let us go
Spirit.
back to that desk in London, 1789, the pen in his hand. Equiano is 54 years old, though he may not have known his own age with certainty, because that kind of record was not kept for kidnapped children from inland African villages. He has survived things that should have destroyed him. He has built a life out of wreckage. He has a wife, a family, a career as a writer and activist, and he is in the final years of his life. He will die in 1797, just 8 years after his book is published. He does not write his book to become famous, though fame comes. He does not write it to make money, though the book sells. He writes it because he wants the world to understand something. Not just what was done to his body, but what was taken from his people. Not just the physical freedom, but the identity, the history, the continuity with something ancient and sacred. He writes the words about the Hebrew customs of his people in the early chapters of his narrative, almost as if.
And this fits the curses. Not those pieces of shit. Alright? The baby dick suckers and all these other vile practices that they do, claiming to be us. No. The prophecies is what they do not teach you. Alright? And that's what we fit. The prophecies. Yeah.
He needs to establish something before he tells the story of loss. As if he needs to say to the reader, before you learn what happened to me, understand what I came from. Understand that we were not empty. We were not blank. We were not waiting to be filled up with someone else's civilization. We had one. We had it long before the slave ships came.
Yes. And that's why they're so, or I should say not so quick, to not let you not let you know anything about yourself before the slave ships. It's just like you just showed up on the earth and then bam, you were slaves. That's done on purpose. Another big key to it is the fact that they don't like to talk about the Dark Ages. No, they make up all kinds of, well, there was no knowledge or anything like that before their primitive asses came on the scene. Alright, because the Most High brought them mighty low after the fall of the Roman Empire, when you get into that history. But again, these were the curses that were put upon us. Alright? And then what those damn Ishmaelites did to us. So again, all this is coming out. You know, we got 2 Corinthians 10th chapter and 4th and 5th verse about, let's get that real quick. There's something else, you know, while we're out there on the highways and byways to do, because as these two scriptures are going to tell you, this is 2 Corinthians 10 and 4. It says, for the weapons of our warfare are not carnal. It's something that they can't, because Edom's nature is carnal. They are a very carnal people. Alright? For the weapons of our warfare are not carnal, but mighty through the Most High to the pulling down of strongholds. Alright? What are some of those strongholds? Casting down imaginations and every high thing that exalted itself against the knowledge of Yahweh Yahushua, and the bringing into captivity every thought for the obedience of Hamashiach Yahushua. These people are contraries to everything that is of Yahweh Yahushua. They show it to you every day. Like the scripture says, the thought of the Most High is not in there. It's not in their minds. It's not in their hearts. They believe in themselves. They believe that they are on par. Scriptures in two separate places. Isaiah 14, and well, actually more, because you also use Ezekiel 28 chapter. All right, even though it's talking about Ithbaal the third in that time period, but as still, you equate that to Edom today with all the knowledge that he has. What has he done with it? He got untold riches. But what does he do with it? 2 Thessalonians 2nd chapter. All right, continuing on.
Equiano's testimony is, at its core, it is an act of historical witness. It is a man saying, I was there, I saw this, these were the customs of my people. Write it down,
Of
remember
my
it, do
people.
not let it disappear. And for a very long time, the world did let it disappear, or tried to. But here we are, in 2025, still reading Olaudah Equiano's words, still asking the questions he raised, still following the thread he left behind, in the only way a person who has had everything taken from them can leave anything behind, through language, through testimony, through a book that has never gone out of print. Here is the question we want to leave you with today. If Equiano's first-hand
map.
account had been taken seriously by historians
Yoruba
in
and Igbo
1789
regions.
and
Look at that.
studied as rigorously as other primary source documents from that era,
From
how
there
different would our understanding of
to
African
there.
history be right now?
All this
How
area
different
here.
would the conversation about identity and heritage and ancient connections be today? Think about that and leave your answer below, because this channel exists for exactly this kind of conversation, the history that was recorded, the history that was buried, and the questions that are still waiting for serious answers. If this video added something to your understanding of African history, please share it with one person who needs to hear this. The algorithm rewards channels that create real conversation, and every comment you leave helps push this content to people who have never seen it. We read every comment, we take every question seriously, and we'll see you in the next one.
So there you go. What do you think? And Enslaved, they got to put that African there. Let's just say Israelite, wrote it in 1789. All right? From the site History Morsels. All right?
This professional 32 TW.
Oh, crap. Salaki. So, yeah, I'll, of course, put the link in the description box. And I'll put the rest of this. But actually here he is here. And let's do something. Because this is what I do. All right, let's get him. All right, let's see. It won't let me do it there. Hold on. Let's go ahead and get this. Let's see. Let me see if it'll let me do it. Hold on. Let's see. All right. This is what I do before I buy anything. All right. I'll see if it's for free. Let's see. An interesting narrative. All right, let's see. So far, so good. All righty. Now let's see if it'll let me. 310 pages. Okay. Let's see if it'll let me download. Save. Alright. Oh, looks like it did. Okay, let's go on here. So you have it for yourself. Alright. Okay. Alrighty. I'll have to put a PDF on here. I don't have a, but it downloaded. I just wanted to make sure that this is what I do, let you know. I've got so many. Hey, you get it for free. That's the way I do. So, once again, I hope whoever views this has been edified. And once again, trying to remind you to remain circumspect out here. You see what's going on with this, not only this heat, but people already freaking out. And it's these evils that are coming are just the beginning of, keep trying to tell you. So keep your eyes and ears open here. So with that, until the next video, hey, shalom. Unfortunately, there's two parts to this.